If you understand geomancy very well, you realize that an attempt to understand or comprehend who God is might not be easy, might be very difficult. That is, trying to explain how God look like will be difficult. Let's use this geometry table to explain what I mean by to an attempt to understand who God is or how God look like or what God is would be kind of difficult. Now, look at these figures. If you understand this four figure, this one here, this one together, we call them mother figure. It is this figure here that bring the rest of the figure we have here and the figures, all these things we have here. It is this is their foundation. Now, this having been their foundation, it means that these four figures can explain how these figures, all of this come about. All of these come about. These four figures can explain them. Taking for instance now, how do we get this one here? These are erected. If you look at it from this 1 2 1 2, which is what we have here, 1 2 1 2. Now this is 1 1 2 2. This is which is what we have here, 1 1 2 2. So it means that that is the same thing. If you check it, that is the same thing that applies. That is the same thing that applies here. So which means that this 4 1. Now, how do we come about this one? It is actually from here as well. This and this are added to get this one. This and this are added to get this one. This and this can added to get this one. This and this are added together. Which means that they can all explain any of these figure, especially the upper one, can explain how the rest comes about. You understand? They can. Now look at it this way. Then which one of these figure here or here can explain how this one comes about, or how this one comes about, or how this one comes about, how this one comes about? None of them, because none of them comes before any of these four figures. None of these figures here comes before this one. Which means that in this sense, it means that these four figures are like the gods of the rest of this figure here. They're like they are the gods of the rest of the figure on this table. Which means that this here are like human beings. Why this one is like the god of this one? So then who can explain how this one comes about? That is the same thing when humans are trying to understand who God is. Even though God said, I created human being in our own image. Religious expression say that God created us in our own image. This one not in the image of all this one as well. This one is not it's not 4 dot, it's not what for or is it not 1 2 3 4? Is it not 4 elements that made up the same element that made up of this one? It's not the same element that made up of this one. Because in Geomancy, this one, they are core element. You understand? These are core elements. This is fire, this is air, this is water, and this is earth, the sound. The same things apply here. They are created in the all these others are created in the same image. But who can then explain? Though, which means this one knows that it cannot exist without the addition of this one. And this one knows that it cannot exist without the existence. So they know that something must have created them as well. It means that they also, because they are already sitting, they are human. This one represents, like this one, this figure represents human being. Any human being that usually has red eyes, a very red eyes, this is the figure that represents them. This figure, and also means anybody that is sick. This figure represents any person that is consistent sick. So it means that this figure, these are not ordinary figure. They represent human being. So it's like having like a table of different human beings on this. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Now, the point I'm trying to make is that this forehead, all of this knows that they don't just exist. This one doesn't just exist without some things behind them. And if they have the opportunity, like now, let's say this one is a human, this one is not a human, it's a human being. If you have to interpret this chart, this is house of 7, this is house of relationship and wife, These are anything related to why. So let's say this lady here, this is a lady here already. Let's say this lady here is saying that, well, oh, let's say somebody's. I want to give a good example. Let me continue with the essential start. I will lump things up. Now, they all have the same element that their gods, the one that bet them, has. You understand? So sometimes there are people who are closer to God, having a kind of shadow, a kind of understanding of how God looked like. Because this one are closer to this one than this. These ones are just single figure. All these four figures, they are just four single figures. They represent a single figure. That is why in geomancy, these places are called days, week. That is, all these figure can be seen as a figure. Just like when you see human being, we have head, we have leg, different parts made up us, make up. You understand? So this is a single figure. But we break them down because we want to lay out something. These four figures are as well a single figure. That is when we want to group all the people or all that we have, we want to group them into four. This one becomes one. And in that sense, that means maybe the question has to do with maybe the question the person is asking, the question you want to interpret has to do with what maybe when that has to do with question of how. Sorry, when that has to do with question of when something happens. So this one talked about this one talked about week, this one talks about month. Why the rest of the figure that the fourth they are because this 1, 2, 3, 4 talks about month. Why 1, 2, 3, 4 talked about year. You understand? But that is not the way I'm going. I just by the way branch somewhere. So what the point I'm trying to make in this video is that now if any of these try to explain who God looked like, some of this will be able to have a clear understanding of what God might look like. That is where we talked about the house of prophets. Because they are closer to God than the rest of the people here, the rest of the but even though if this prophet, even though they can give us ideas of how God look like, but nobody, because all these four figures are not created in their own presence. It means that I am the one, I am me myself that can explain how this one comes about. So it means that I'm not God though. I just want you to understand. It means that I am, even though this one is not even God. If anybody, whoever, the prophet, whatever they say they know about God, they only have a good understanding of how God look like, not God himself. Because it was not created. But me, which means that I'm not God though, don't misquote me. Which means that I am the one that created this one. Which means that the more you say you know about God, the more you get closer to God, the more God shift away from where you think you know him. Now, the reason why I said, which means that the one who bring about these four, they are the ones that will know. Which means that at the end of the whole experiment, you can be saying that these one two are not really God. They are like the archangel. They are like the four angels that we said. You see that people discover that there are four angels. Some people discover that there are 7 stars. Then there was no for archangel. But when people get to know about that, there are 7 stars, there are 7 planets, blah 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 like that. The 7 star, before you know them, they have already created another 4 star. But we call them archangels. So the more you are getting closer to God, the more God transforms into another existence, transform into another things entirely. So now initially I said I am the God. I'm not God, don't misquote me. So I am, because I was the one that bring about this. I know where it was coming from. Because initially before this to become this, we do something. We did something like this. We sow a seed. We make some sand. I was the one that do it. Then it was from those things I mark on that bring about this thing. So I am the only one that can explain this. So me happens to be the people that know about archangels. People that know the secret of the archangels. You understand? Now, if those people is now claiming to be God, that they know God, then the question would then be that the seed that they sow, all those marking that they do on the ground. Do you understand? You don't do those things. Let me just, in order not to bring this too long, probably I will explain in the other video. If the more we show interest, the more I can explain this better. Because the more you understand how geomancy mirrors life, the more you can spiritually understand life in general. And the more you can spiritually guide yourself without external guidance or without anybody, because there are some things you listen to, there are some things you hear that doesn't represent your actual reality. But I don't want this to be too long. The point I'm trying to explain here is that, well, if you try to say you know God, the being that the omnipotent that wasn't created in your own presence, then how will you dare explain the person that wasn't created in your own presence? So it's outside our terrain. God is outside our brain. It is something that is within your brain that you can be talking about. God is outside our brain box. You understand? It's outside our brain box. It is not within this realm. You understand? So, however, don't let me just prolong this. I just want you to understand that, well, the more you try to explain the concept of God, the more God shifts. The more you try to say, because if you worship God very well, or you are spiritually inclined, you get closer to God. Not necessarily religiously, it is by worshiping God that you get closer to God. But in spiritism, it's not by worshiping God. Because by getting yourself into some spiritual stuff, that you get closer to the universal being. You understand? But regardless, God is outside your own time frame.